Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess of the committee at any time. This subcommittee is continuing its examination and call for immediate federal action on PFAS. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to give an opening statement. Good afternoon. This is the fourth hearing the Environmental Subcommittee has held on the contamination of air, water, and food with perfluoroalkyl and polyfluoroalkyl substances, class of man-made chemicals referred to as PFAS. Our previous hearings have established the scientific facts about these chemicals. They do not degrade, earning their nickname forever chemicals. And they are toxic to humans, having been linked to serious adverse health outcomes such as low fertility birth defects, suppression of the immune system, thyroid disease, and cancer. We have heard witnesses testify to the pervasiveness of PFAS contamination in America's water, air, and food supplies. Some of them are here today. At our hearing in September, we heard about the actions of certain corporations to downplay the scientific research linking these dangerous chemicals to serious adverse health effects and to conceal this evidence from the American public. Today, our goal is to urge this administration to take immediate federal action to regulate and clean up these dangerous chemicals. You know, at these hearings, we public officials tend to speak perhaps a little too clinically. We say PFAS chemicals can cause birth defects and cancer in humans. But what we should be saying is this: because these chemicals have been cavalierly dumped by corporations in rivers and landfills, they have poisoned pregnant women and permanently injured and damaged their children, who will suffer severe health problems for the rest of their lives. People have lost their spouses, parents, and other loved ones. People have been saddled with medical bills they cannot afford, and that will put them into massive long-term debt, sometimes for the rest of their lives. We've got people who are just now realizing they've been drinking contaminated water for years, who have to pray each day that they don't get sick and their families don't get sick. So even now, we might speak about the PFAS crisis in terms that sound impersonal and bureaucratic, like saying we need to regulate these chemicals and set maximum contaminant levels. What we're really trying to say is that we need government to save people's lives by protecting them from dangerous chemicals they did not know they were drinking and wouldn't have drunk if the truth had not been shrouded by them from corporations that knew for decades how toxic these chemicals were and are. We need the federal government to protect people because we've seen what happens when it leaves it to corporations. And you know, in what has become an intensely partisan environment here in Congress, this is one issue on which the two parties really can find agreement. The ranking member of this subcommittee to my right, James Comer, said at our July 24th hearing on PFAS, quote, "It is bipartisan that we want clean drinking water. It doesn't matter if you are a conservative or liberal or moderate, we all want clean drinking water. There is no question about that." But the ranking member knows as well as I do that water doesn't stay clean on its own. By taking one look at the Environmental Working Group's map of congressional districts with known PFAS contamination, we can see just how true this is. Our water is poisoned in Ohio, in Arizona, in North Dakota, just to name a few. We, the representatives of the people, have to work to protect that water, to keep that water safe from companies that seek to maximize their profits through pollution. And yes, that does require regulation. So when it comes right down to it, the debate we're having over whether to regulate PFAS is a debate about two camps: the American public and all of us who want clean water, and the companies who have made a lot of money by exposing people to toxic substances against their will. This is a horror story of epic proportions, and so it's no surprise that it caught the attention of one of our witnesses today, Mark Ruffalo. In the new Dark Waters movie, he plays the attorney Robert Bilott, thank you, Robert Bilott, who himself testified before this subcommittee in September. Mr. Bilott defended thousands of plaintiffs in Parkersburg, West Virginia, against DuPont, a chemical manufacturer that not only contaminated the groundwater in Parkersburg, but also spent decades covering up that they had done so. And the horror story does not end there. The drinking water supplies on and around military bases have been contaminated by these chemicals and haven't yet been cleaned up. These men and women answered the call of duty and risked their lives for our country. and yet they can't safely take a drink of water from their canteen. This is a tragedy, plain and simple. Mark Favors, a U.S. Army veteran, is here with us today to share his story and those of his family members who are suffering the human cost of PFAS contamination on and around military bases. The Environmental Protection Agency needs to set maximum contaminant levels under the Safe Drinking Water Act, not just for the two most notorious types of PFAS chemicals, PFAS and PFOA, but for PFAS as a class of more than 5,000 different man-made chemicals. And the Department of Defense needs to commit to cleaning up contamination around military sites expeditiously and work with the urgency this crisis demands to find an alternative to the PFAS-containing firefighting foam used in training exercises. The EPA has announced that it will issue its proposed regulatory determinations for PFAS and PFOA by the end of the year, and it can't come soon enough. But it is imperative that Americans be kept safe from all PFAS chemicals. The fact is, we don't know the full extent of the effects these chemical alternatives to PFOA and PFAS will have on humans. But the scientific evidence thus far suggests that these chemicals are toxic, that they do bioaccumulate in the human body, just like their predecessors. Do we really want to be sitting here 50 years from now asking ourselves why we didn't take action on these so-called alternatives? The same way we're sitting here in the year 2019 asking ourselves why we didn't regulate PFAS and PFOA earlier. I hope we take the opportunity to learn from our mistakes rather than repeat them. We are finished with being hoodwinked by corporate interests. We are done being placated, being told we're moving forward when we're actually standing still. The American people are paying attention, and I promise you all that I will work relentlessly with my fellow members here to ensure that you have the freedom to drink water from your faucet and your well without worrying that it will someday give you cancer. I will work to ensure your safety. The United States should not be a place where your water can kill you. Before I invite the subcommittee's ranking member, Mr. Comer, to give his opening statement, I want to say a few words about the conduct we witnessed from our minority at our last hearing on tailpipe emissions, rollbacks, and federal policy to address climate change. You know, it's not always fun being in the minority, and Republicans are going through a tough time right now being forced to defend a deeply unethical president. But there is no excuse for trying to shut down a hearing that this subcommittee convened in good faith in an effort to ensure Americans' right to breathe clean air. The minority requested and was granted their own witness for that hearing. Yet neither Mr. Comer nor any of my other colleagues in the minority ever came to me or my staff before the hearing to broach any concerns. Frankly, when my Republican colleague from Arizona made the motion to adjourn, I wasn't even sure he was still a member of the subcommittee because I can count on 2 fingers how many times he's attended these subcommittee meetings. But he did find the time to come and try and shut down a hearing on climate change policy and Americans' right to clean air. Those actions were not in good faith. I certainly hope that, in the future, my Republican colleagues would have the courtesy and the decency to come to me beforehand to raise any concerns they might have. I should also point out that when we Democrats were in the minority, we never once, not once, tried to adjourn one of the committee's hearings. In a sad way, my Republican colleagues' stunt at the last hearing represents exactly what is wrong with their party's entire approach to addressing the most important environmental issue of our time. They just ignore the problem, put their heads in the sand, and try to shut down any attempt to promote smart policy that addresses scientific reality. If that's the way my Republican colleagues think the government should be run, they should be ashamed, because it's not just the members of one political party whose lives are at risk. If we do not act now to protect the right to clean air and clean water, if we don't work to address the existential crisis of climate change, then all of our lives are at risk. We are the stewards of the public interest. We owe it to the American people to tackle the big problems, not waste time with cheap stunts. And with that, the chair now recognizes the ranking member, Mr. Comer of Kentucky, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.